There is a question mark whether the government has designated the climate change awareness group Extinction Rebellion as an extremist group with an extremist ideology. The government's definition of what constitutes extremism is contained in the Counter-Extremism Strategy 2015, which says, "Extremism is the vocal or active opposition to our fundamental values, including democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and respect and tolerance of different faiths and beliefs." As a result, anyone who opposes and breaks the law would be at risk of opposing the rule of law contained in the government's definition and thus considered extremist. What is interesting is a Prevent guidance document prepared by the Counter-Terrorism Police in South England entitled "Safeguarding Young People and Adults from Ideological Extremism" has listed XR as an extremist group with other banned groups like National Action and Al-Muhajirun. The guidance was issued as part of the UK government's Prevent strategy, which is a programme designed to challenge the ideology of terrorism and support individuals at risk. The guidance, presumably in line with UK's government's definition of extremism, describes a threat posed by XR in this way: an anti-establishment philosophy that seeks system changes underlies its activism. The group attracts to its events school-aged children and adults alike to be aware of this. While non-violent against persons, the campaign encourages other law-breaking activities. Following concerns raised by XR and other groups as an unjustified restriction on the group's right to protest, this guidance document has been recalled and the Home Office reportedly stated the inclusion of XR was an error and will be reviewed. However, the UK's Home Secretary is reported to have said in a radio interview that XR was a protest group, not a terror threat, but stopped short of outright criticising the decision to designate XR as an extremist group and said the government was constantly looking at individuals and groups. The Home Secretary continued to have said, "They are obviously a protest organisation, but everything has to be based in terms of risk to the public, security risks, security threats." So, what would happen if XR was designated as an extremist group? Here's 14 possible consequences. 1. Being designated as an extremist group, public sector workers such as teachers, social workers, doctors and nurses would be under a Section 26 terrorism duty to identify and report XR individuals at risk of being drawn into terrorism for re-education and de-radicalisation. Such individuals to be identified and referred would include the organisers of XR protests, attendees of XR protests and supporters of XR. Those who support the guidance document will probably say it provides helpful assistance to public sector workers to identify the signs of individuals at risk of being drawn into terrorism, as stated in the guidance as follows. You may see them wear the group's logo or phrases "tell the truth," "rise up," or "rebel" among individuals' personal possessions. Participation in direct action or training, desire to be arrested for civil disobedience, or support for associated groups like Compassionate Revolution and Rising Up. 2. Being designated as an extremist group may mean parents and carers who organise, attend or support XR are likely to be subject to investigation by Children's Services and CTU police officers to ensure that any children in the family and children associated with the family have not been exposed to its ideological threats, and may start care proceedings if they believe they have. 3. Being designated as an extremist group, XR are likely to be prevented from hiring any public authority building such as libraries and community centres, as Prevent officers would advise local councillors and council officials not to allow its rooms to be used by them. 4. Being designated as an extremist group, XR would be subject to possible no platform policies at university and student unions and stopped from organising events and speaking at events. 5. Being designated as an extremist group means that it is easier for senior police officers to justify a ban of an XR protest march under Section 13 or impose Section 14 police conditions on their static protests. 6. Being designated as an extremist group, an XR supporter who shares XR material with others, which is likely to encourage directly or indirectly civil disobedience involving serious criminal damage, is at risk of committing a terrorist offence, Section 2 Dissemination of terrorist publication. 7. Being designated as an extremist group means an association with XR protest is likely to aggravate any offence committed and therefore attract a higher sentence. 8. Being designated as an extremist group means that any foreign citizen advocating XR or similar extremist ideology could well be excluded from entering the UK and opens up the possibility of a dual national being stripped of their citizenship. 9. Being designated as an extremist group means XR organisers, participants and its supporters are likely to be placed on an extremism database as persons of interest and may be refused government contracts, public sector roles and restricted in particular government posts. 10. Being designated as an extremist group means that there is likely to be greater C2U scrutiny of the group to gather intelligence concerning XR, including the use of undercover officers, directed surveillance and intrusive surveillance. 11. Being designated as an extremist group, XR supporters are likely to be subject to Schedule 7 passenger stops. 12. Being designated as an extremist group, any XR supporter linked to a charity is likely to be subject to a Charity Commission investigation and the powers and sanctions therein. 13. Being designated as an extremist group, any XR members are likely to be deemed as high risk of committing money abuse and subject to sanctions such as their bank accounts being closed. 14. Any group being designated as an extremist group is at the first stage of being banned under Section 3 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Being designated and labelled as an extremist group certainly has many serious consequences. To many, it would appear unfair and contrary to the rule of law for the government to designate any group as an extremist group based on secrecy, pressure from media reporting and think tanks, with no due process involved. A proper due process involves a clear and concise statutory definition of extremism applicable to all groups, a court application by the government, a right to challenge the application and the information contained in it, and a right of appeal. With the lack of due process and rule of law in mind, it also appears unsurprising when groups who do challenge government on a range of issues from climate change to human rights to be so easily designated as extreme. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe so you can be the first to watch this series on protest laws and other videos on various topics. Please speak to a solicitor if you need legal advice, and may the justice be with you.